It was Halloween night 2017, the kind of evening where every breath of wind smelled like fallen leaves and wood smoke. Kids ran up and down sidewalks dressed as vampires, witches, superheroes, plastic pumpkins bouncing in their hands. Almost. Every porch was lit, every lawn glowing with fake skeletons and flickering lights. But on the far edge of town, past the quiet residential streets and into the older part of the neighborhood, things looked different. The homes were larger here, spaced far apart, many of them older and in varying states of disrepair. That's where Julie found herself driving that night, headed to an unfamiliar house for a babysitting job she'd only agreed to hours earlier. She was 19, a freshman at a nearby community college, and money had been tight lately. Her usual babysitting clients were out of town or had family visiting. Then a friend messaged her about the Bransons, a couple who needed someone last minute, to watch their 6-year-old son. The mom, Melanie, had called Julie shortly after, and though her voice was polite, there was something strange about it, calm, but distant, as if she was distracted or not quite present. Still, Julie said yes. 5 hours of babysitting for decent cash was hard to pass up as she pulled into the driveway a few minutes before 7. The Branson house was 2 stories tall, with peeling paint and a sagging front porch. 2 jack-o'-lanterns sat on the steps, but they were mushy and dark, as if no one had bothered to light them or replace them. Fake cobwebs hung from the porch. Railings, but they were yellowed with age and covered in real spiderwebs. The neighborhood was eerily quiet. Julie noticed there weren't any trick-or-treaters here. No kids, no laughter, not even the usual hum of porch conversations or parents calling their kids back to the sidewalk. She figured maybe this part of town just didn't get much traffic. The front door creaked open before she could knock. Melanie. Branson stood there, dressed in a tattered old costume, a bride of Frankenstein, complete with a gray-streaked wig and white face makeup. She smiled weakly and stepped aside. Her husband, Stan, was adjusting his cape and fangs behind her. He didn't say much. They both seemed rushed. "Thank you so much for coming," Melanie said quickly, brushing past Julie and pointing down. The hall. TVs in the living room, snacks in the kitchen, and Tommy should be in bed by 9. He already had dinner. Julie nodded, glancing around the dimly lit entryway. The inside of the house felt heavy, like it hadn't been aired out in weeks. The wallpaper was old, faded. A few Halloween decorations were taped to the walls, but they looked reused and dusty. There was a faint smell of something musty, maybe mold. Maybe old wood. Julie finally saw Tommy standing near the living room, holding a small pumpkin bucket in one hand. He was in a costume, though it was hard to tell what maybe a ghost or zombie. He didn't say anything, just stared at her. "Hi there," Julie said gently, smiling. "I'm Julie. I'm gonna hang out with you tonight." Tommy blinked and gave a tiny nod. He seemed like a quiet kid, maybe shy. Melanie didn't even bend down to hug him goodbye. She simply called out, "Be good," and walked out the door, her heels clicking across the porch. Stan followed, giving Julie a nod as he closed the door behind him. As silence fell over the house, Julie looked at the time, 7:03 p.m. Just 5 hours, she thought. Easy money. She and Tommy sat on the couch, flipping through some kids' shows. He didn't talk much. Every question she asked got a nod or shake of the head. He didn't seem scared or upset, just oddly calm. As the show played, Julie noticed something else. There hadn't been a single knock at the door. No kids ringing the bell. She got up to look outside. Still nothing. The other houses nearby were dark. A few porch lights were on, but not many. And there were no kids anywhere. She stepped out on the porch for a moment, scanning the street. A cold wind rustled the leaves, but that was it. No laughter, no footsteps, no movement. She checked her phone. Good signal, no messages. Everything felt normal. but wrong at the same time. Back inside, the warmth of the house felt less comforting and more like a trap. Julie sat back on the couch and glanced at Tommy. He was staring at the screen, unmoving, like he'd been doing this for years. Something about him, his stillness, his silence, put her on edge. Kids usually asked questions, told stories, begged for candy, but Tommy just sat. As the minutes dragged on, Julie realized she hadn't heard a single sound from outside. No cars, no music. Just the soft hum of the TV and the occasional creak of the old house settling. By the time the clock hit 8 p.m., Julie was already checking the locks on the doors and windows. Something about this place made her uneasy. She told herself it was just nerves, just an unfamiliar house on a spooky night. But deep down, she knew something was off. She didn't know what yet, but she could feel it, and Halloween had only just begun. Julie sat in the dim living room, the flickering light from the TV casting strange shadows on the walls. Tommy sat cross-legged on the floor, his eyes locked onto the screen as if hypnotized by the cartoon. The clock on the wall ticked past 8 p.m. The house was still, uncomfortably so. Julie glanced at her phone. No texts, no calls. She shifted on the couch, trying to shake the weird feeling crawling up her back. That's when she heard it, the faintest sound. Tap, tap. It came from the front window. She froze, listening. Another few seconds of silence passed. Then again, tap, tap, tap. She stood up slowly and walked to the window, expecting to see a late trick-or-treater. Maybe a kid who got separated from their group or someone playing a prank. She pulled the curtain aside and looked out into the night. Nothing. The porch was empty. The old jack-o'-lantern sat rotting on the steps, untouched. The street beyond was quiet. No movement, no footsteps, no Halloween spirit at all. Julie frowned. She was about to let the curtain fall back into place when she saw something out of the corner of her eye, a quick blur, like someone stepping out of sight around the side of the house. She stepped back, heart picking up speed. Okay, she said to herself quietly. It's just a kid messing around. Trying not to show how nervous she felt, Julie turned back toward the living room. Tommy was still sitting there, completely still. She tried to sound casual. Did you hear that tapping, bud? Without turning his head, Tommy said softly, They like to watch. Julie blinked. What do you mean? He finally turned to look at her. His expression was calm, his voice even flatter. The window people. Mommy says don't talk to them. Julie stared at him, unsure if he was joking. Tommy. Is that a game? He didn't respond. Just turned back to the screen. Her skin prickled. She walked through the kitchen, trying to laugh it off. Just a weird kid with an overactive imagination. Maybe he watched too many scary cartoons. But then came the tapping again, louder this time. Tap tap from a different direction. She spun around and headed toward the side of the house where the noise came from. She crept to the window near the dining area and slowly pulled the curtain back. Nothing again. The outside yard was dark. The porch light didn't reach this far. The shadows between the trees near the edge of the backyard were thick. Still, Julie couldn't shake the feeling that someone was standing just out of sight. The silence was oppressive, almost pressing in on the walls of the house. Suddenly, a rustle. She flinched, heart racing, but it was just leaves blowing across the yard. She tried calling Melanie and Stan again. No answer. Straight to voicemail. Julie returned to the living room and found Tommy staring directly at her. His eyes were too wide, too still. Tommy, she said quietly, have people ever come to the house before on Halloween? He nodded slowly. Who are they? She asked. He shrugged. They don't say names. They look like people, but they're not. Julie felt cold all over. She didn't want to feed into the kid's imagination, but this didn't feel like just A story. She glanced around the room, checking the windows again. Every curtain was drawn now, but she still felt like eyes were on her. She sat back down and gripped her phone, debating whether to call the police. But what would she even say? Someone might be outside, and the kid says shadow people are watching. She sighed and looked at the time. 8:37 p.m. Almost halfway through. She could make it. Then, from the corner of her eye, something moved across the window opposite the couch. A pale, almost translucent face. It glided past the glass in a blink, gone before she could even register it fully. She jumped up and rushed to the window, yanking the curtain aside. Nothing. Again. But this time she saw her own reflection, and behind her, over her shoulder in the living room, she could have sworn she saw another figure standing. When she turned, the room was empty. Tommy still sat, still unmoving. She could feel the blood pounding in her ears. That's when the electricity flickered. The lights dimmed for a second, then came back. The TV crackled. Julie stood in place. Not breathing, no storm, no bad weather. Just a sudden drop in energy. The quiet came back, deeper than before. And then a soft creak from behind. Julie turned toward the hallway and saw that the basement door was open a crack. She was sure it had been shut. She hadn't touched it, and she hadn't seen Tommy go near it. She walked over, heart hammering in her chest, and put her hand on the knob. The air coming from the gap was cold, much colder than the rest of the house. She leaned in slightly, listening. That's when she heard it, a whisper, her name, Julie. The sound was thin, like it came from far below, maybe through a vent or a pipe, but it wasn't muffled. It was clear, deliberate, and it sent a bolt of fear straight through her chest. She slammed the basement door shut and locked it, backing away quickly. Her hands were shaking now. She turned to check on Tommy to make sure he was still okay. She raced upstairs and found him in bed, under the covers, eyes wide open. He looked at her and said, "They don't like when you close doors." Julie froze. The window in his room was wide open, curtains flapping. And outside, just beyond the trees, something moved. Julie stood frozen at the threshold of Tommy's bedroom, the cold October air slipping in through the open window and making the curtains flutter like ghostly arms. Her eyes darted to the trees outside, barely visible in the dark, but something had definitely moved. A shadow, a figure. She couldn't be sure. She rushed to the window and slammed it shut, locking it tightly. Tommy didn't even flinch. He just lay there beneath the covers, staring at her with wide, unblinking eyes. "Did you open this window?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. He shook his head. "They come in that way sometimes," he whispered. "When the house forgets to be quiet." The words made her skin crawl. "Who comes in?" she asked. "The ones who used to live in the basement," he answered simply, as if explaining. "The weather." Julie forced herself to smile and tuck the blanket up around him. "Stay here, okay? Don't move." She left the room and closed the door halfway behind her. As she descended the stairs, each step creaked just enough to remind her how old and empty the house felt. She reached the bottom floor and stood still, listening. The ticking clock in the living room was the only sound. No more whispering, no tapping, nothing. Just a deep, unnatural stillness. Then she noticed the basement door again. The lock she had turned was now unlatched, and the door itself was slightly ajar. Julie felt her blood run cold. She hadn't heard it open, hadn't heard anyone move. She stepped forward slowly and gently pushed the door open. The stairs stretched down into darkness, and the basement light, which had been off before, was now glowing faintly. She could see the last few steps, ending in concrete and shadow. The air that rose up was musty and sour, like mold mixed with something sweet and decayed rotting wood or worse. She gripped the railing and slowly descended a few steps, just enough to lean in and get a better view. "Hello?" she called, barely above a whisper. Her voice sounded swallowed by the silence, like the basement itself refused to echo it back. Nothing answered, no movement, no sound. But just as she turned to go back up, she saw something near the far wall, a small child's shoe. Old, dirty, covered in dust. And next to it, a crumpled piece of paper. Julie stepped down another stair, then another. She couldn't help herself. She needed to see what it was. She crouched, picked up the paper, and unfolded it. A child's drawing. A stick figure girl with long hair standing between two tall dark shapes. Beneath it, written in childish handwriting. They said, "I can stay if I don't scream." Her breath caught in her throat. She looked around, suddenly aware that she was farther into the basement than she meant to be. She turned to rush back up, but the light flickered. And in that flicker, for just a moment, she saw something standing in the corner. Something tall. Still, watching. She bolted up the stairs, heart racing, and slammed the basement door shut behind her. She fumbled with the lock, nearly dropping the knife she'd taken from the kitchen earlier. Once the door was locked, she stepped back and leaned against the wall, trying to catch her breath. Her hands were shaking violently. She tried calling the Bransons again. Still no answer. Just voicemail. She thought about calling the police, but what would she even say? That she saw a shadow in the basement? That the house was too quiet? That a 6-year-old boy was saying ghosts come through the windows? She walked through the house, checking every door, every window. They were all locked now, every curtain drawn tight. She turned off the TV, needing the silence to think. That's when she noticed something strange in the living room. One of the throw pillows had been moved, just slightly. It was turned the wrong way. And next to it, something small and red, what looked like a marble or a bead. She picked it. Up. It was glass, cold. It reminded her of a doll's eye. A loud creak echoed above her head. Julie froze and looked up. Tommy's room. She ran up the stairs, 2 at a time, and flung his door open. Tommy was still in bed. But he wasn't asleep. He was sitting upright, his eyes wide. "He's in the closet," he whispered. Julie turned slowly toward the narrow closet in the corner. The door was shut. "Who's in there?" she asked, not really wanting the answer. "The other boy," Tommy said, his voice trembling now. "He lives in the walls." Julie approached the closet with caution. She opened the door slowly. Clothes, boxes, nothing unusual. But something caught her eye near the back, a small, square panel. A hole in the wall just big enough for a child to crawl through. She knelt down and looked inside. The opening led into total darkness. She held up her phone and turned on the flashlight. The narrow crawl space extended deep into the wall, maybe through to the attic or the basement. She could see faint marks along the inside scratches, old crayon drawings, and what looked like fingerprints smeared into the wood. One drawing stood out, a stick figure girl with long brown hair. It looked like the same girl from the basement paper. Next to it, in tiny letters, Julie. Her heart nearly stopped. She stumbled back, phone shaking in her hand. She'd never been here before, so why was her name already in this house? Julie stared at the name scrawled inside the crawl space, her own name, written in faded, childlike letters beneath a crude drawing of a girl who looked eerily similar to her. Long brown hair, a dress, stick arms outstretched. It wasn't just a coincidence. Her heart pounded in her ears as the flashlight in her hand began to flicker. She backed away from the closet, stumbling slightly as she stood up. The air in Tommy's room felt heavier now, colder. She turned to him. "Tommy, did you write that?" she asked, her voice barely steady. He shook his head. "It was already there," he said. She told me your name. Julie's breath caught. Who told you? The girl in the wall, he answered softly. She said you came here before, but you forgot. That didn't make sense. Julie had never been in this house before tonight. She'd never met the Bransons, never seen Tommy, never even been to this side of town. You must be confused, she said, almost to herself. But Tommy looked up at her with something like pity in his eyes. You were here before Halloween, he said, a long time ago. But you didn't stay. Julie's hands trembled as she closed the closet door. She didn't know what was going on, if it was a prank, a hallucination, a nightmare. But she knew she needed to get out. She reached for her phone, only to see the screen flicker and die. Battery dead, even though she'd charged it before coming. She took Tommy's hand. Come on, she said. We're going to wait outside. But when they reached the front door, it wouldn't open. The lock turned, but the door stayed shut like it was glued into place. She yanked harder, then used her shoulder to try and push it open. Nothing. Try the back door, she said quickly, pulling Tommy with her through the kitchen. But that one was the same. It wouldn't budge. Windows wouldn't open either. Even the glass felt oddly warm, like it wasn't really glass at all. Then came the tapping again. Not from outside this time. It came from within the walls. Tap, 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 followed by the creaking sound of something moving upstairs. Footsteps, but heavier than a child's. Julie's breath quickened. She told Tommy to stay by her side and grabbed the kitchen knife again. What is this place? She whispered, not expecting an answer, but Tommy spoke. It's a Halloween house, he said simply. It keeps the ones it likes. Julie stared at him. What do you mean? He looked down. They said they tried to keep you once before, but you got away. You weren't supposed to. That's why you forgot. Julie shook her head. That's not possible. I would remember. They said if you stayed too long this time, you wouldn't forget again. The lights in the house began to flicker violently, and a low sound started to rise, a distant moaning, like a wind howling through pipes, but deeper. It vibrated through the walls. Julie backed away from the window, scanning the room for anything at all that could be a way out. That's when the floor beneath her gave a sudden groan, like wood starting to split. She looked down, just in time to see a long, thin crack snaking through the hardwood. Then, from behind her, the basement door creaked open again. Slowly, deliberately, Julie spun around. The knife trembled in her hand, and then she saw her, a girl, standing at the top of the basement stairs. Not a child, not quite. Her features were blurry, like smoke trying to hold its shape. Her eyes were black, too wide. Her skin had a waxy pale sheen like an old mannequin. She raised one hand and pointed directly at Julie. Tommy clutched Julie's leg, burying his face against her side. That's her, he whispered. She's the one who remembers you. Julie stepped back as the girl at the top of the stairs started moving forward, slow, gliding steps. Julie turned and ran with Tommy down the hall, through the living room, toward the front again. The door still wouldn't budge. She pounded on it, screamed for help. Nothing. No one outside. Not even a breeze. And then suddenly silence. Everything went still. No lights flickering. No tapping. No whispers. Just the sound of her own breath. She turned around slowly. No girl. No figure. The basement door was shut again. Tommy was gone. Julie stood alone. She spun in a panic, calling his name. Tommy. Tommy. No answer. She ran back upstairs, checked every room. Empty. The bed was neatly made. No sign he'd ever been in it. Then she went to the closet. The panel was gone, sealed, as if it had never been there. She stared at it, breathless, mind racing. She pulled at the wall, pounded on it, but it was solid. She stumbled backward and saw something else. Her phone was sitting on the floor outside the room. She picked it up. It turned on instantly, full battery. She had one new message. It was from a number she didn't recognize. It said, "Thanks for coming tonight. Tommy had such a great time. Hope you got home safe." Julie stood in the silent hallway, staring at the screen. She hadn't left. She hadn't said goodbye. She hadn't driven home. And yet, someone thought she had. Or maybe something wanted her to believe she did. Behind her, the closet door creaked open one last time. And the light inside blinked out.